Hello, listeners, and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to look at the good, the bad, and the bewildering of movies, either starring, about, or by pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, including all of the ones featured in this one film. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker and video artist. I also write for the Geek Show and Byline Times, and I've been joined this week by...
I'm Mark Harrison. I'm a writer, quizmaster for film stories of various other outlets, and walk hard aficionado, let's say.
Yes, this is one of Mark's favourite films, which is incredibly lucky because I haven't made any notes. I'm just going to wind him up and watch him go, to be honest.
That's handy.
Yeah, it is something that we've been circling around for a very long time, is it not?
Yeah, it's. I think it's maybe the essential movie for this for this podcast in terms of it has actually got singers acting in it, which is a nice thing.
True. Yeah.
It's got an incredible performance by an actor as a singer, a living legend, a totally real person who is the subject of this film.
But it feels like we've been planning it for a long while, because I feel like every time we do, not just you and me and anyone, do a biopic on this podcast, this is the subtext.
Yeah, it comes up like for anyone listening all this time who hasn't seen this film, is like, what's Walk Hard? Why do they keep mentioning it? We're about to explain a few things.
Yes. And it's possible that people haven't seen this because it was not very successful on its initial release.
Yeah, and it's a mad thing, is that the reason we've just kind of last year got through a writers and actors strike that just finished. And if you remember, the last writers strike was 2007, 2008. Walk Hard was released in cinemas in the US in December 2007, which is like a prime spot for the sort of Oscar bait movies that it's parodying. So, that lends into every aspect of this is taking films like this, like that, like Walk the Line and Ray, like the big Oscar darling type biopics that were coming up in the years before its release. But with the writers' strike on, there's no late night shows, so there's no promotion going on. They did come up with a way around that, like a way of promoting it without, breaking any of the and still standing solid with the strike. But we'll get to that when we get to the sheer amount of work that was put into this very silly comedy about a country singer who chops his brother in half with a machete when he's a child and spends his entire life trying to come to terms with that.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. And that country singer is Dewey Cox, as in the film's full title, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox Story. And I think we need to spend a bit of time, like at the top of the show, just hymning John C Reilly, just talking about how incredible John C Reilly is.
This was the year, speaking of the Oscars, by the way, this was the year that the actual Oscars, Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor, and I think it's a travesty. Nothing in There Will Be Blood is as good as John C Reilly is in this. There's like I'm going to reference this a lot. There's a feature that came out a couple of years ago that if you love the film or you're interested in read more about it after listening to this, you go have a read of Dewey Cox Ain't Dead, an oral history of Walk Hard, which was it popped up on The Ringer online, May 2019. But like that kind of talks through the beginnings of that, so it's produced by Judd Apatow, who at that point, you've got Knocked Up and 40-Year-Old Virgin and Superbad. There's a whole stable in the mid-aughts of Judd Apatow comedies. And he's kind of, and the director and writer is, he co-writes it with Jake Kasdan, who's the director we'll come to shortly. But between the two of them, they just say that John C Reilly was the only choice for this, like for this idea they had of wanting to spoof music biopics, because there was going back to the Oscars again. There's a gag in a number that they did at the Oscars about how comedians never win. That's sort of a duet between Will Ferrell and Jack Black, and then John C. Reilly stands up in the audience. And obviously he has an incredible singing voice, but starts singing about how he's the only person who can be in both Boogie Nights and Talladega Nights. Because he's a funny actor and a dramatic one. And like, whether wittingly or not, that's perfection for this. Because the thing about this is, it isn't... You look at where the movie Spoof was at the time, never mind like the Apatow comedy that was more popular. Like the movie Spoof, stuff like Airplane and Hot Shots and Naked Gun, long gone. At this point, it's just in the toilet. Like the year this came out, 2007, saw the release of Epic Movie, Meet the Spartans, and Disaster Movie. 3 movies within the span of about 12 to 18 months. Billed as from 2 of the 6 writers of Scary Movie. Just this absolute empty... Look at some shit you recognize. Yeah, look at this. Look at this shit you recognize. Crap. And this in the midst of that. With its battles, not being able to promote it properly as well. Like I can understand why no one was in the mood to go watch a spoof of what is quite boldly a spoof of Walk the Line. Yeah. And so it takes influences from Ray as well, from the Ray Charles biopic. Like. That covers a lot of the basis of Dewey Cox's fictional life. But the depth in this is one of the things that I want to get talking about this, really.
Well, yeah, because that biopic spoof element, that's a huge part of it, but it's at best half the movie. The rest of the movie, which when I saw this at the cinema for the first time, I was surprised and delighted to find out, because the marketing gave you no real implication that this was going to happen. The rest of the movie is the entire history of rock and roll filtered through Dewey Cox.
Yeah, it's the Forrest Gumping of American pop music history, but it works both ways. That because it's a spoof of Walk the Line and Ray, it doesn't go so far as Johnny Cash and Ray Charles characters in it. They don't seem to exist in this, but Elvis and the Beatles and Bob Dylan and David Bowie do, and Dewey Cox relates to all of them most often by ripping them off. It's like, he's a
fantastic joke that I'd forgotten all about, where one of the scenes in biopics that I think despite being more biopic indulgent than you, Mark, I always complain about the scene on the show, is the scene where someone just sort of randomly comes up with the lyrics to a massive hit song that they had. And there's a wonderful scene where Dewey Cox almost does it with For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield, and then gets the last word wrong, which is so good.
That just keeps happening all the way through, doesn't it? Like the thing that Mark Kermode calls a chubby moment in biopics, based on the thing of Karen Carpenter going chubby But that thing of everyone, not just him, like him saying "Walk Hard" and then writing a song called "Walk Hard" and saying "Guilty as Charged" and running out and singing that. But then you get everyone doing it as well. Like you get John Lennon doing "Imagine," but then you get George Harrison not quite getting there, just saying "While my guitar quietly whimpers." or whatever. It's just like not quite there, but so you get this thing of he's the most influential figure in music history. So when you cast John C. Reilly in this role, someone who turns out to have not only just incredible comedic range and dramatic range, but a great vocal range as well. You have him across time doing, there's 120 wardrobe changes for John C. Reilly in this movie. There's different hairstyles and wigs and prosthetics. It's nothing short of Life and Death of Colonel Blimp for John C. Reilly. There's nothing like this before or since. He's been top billed in movies. He's what they'll call a character actor in America, if you like. But this is his major leading man role, and he leaves absolutely nothing on the table. And I don't think that there isn't a scene he isn't in, really. So he's fully carrying this, and that went all the way through production as well. Is that obviously one of the things you've got to do in this is write a lot of songs. Because, even with this, the theatrical cut being an hour and 40 minutes long, you're going to get through a lot of. If you're going to do someone who, at the start of the film, he's going on stage for his final gig as an old man and all this kind of thing, and to characterize the line, we should wait there. Dewey Cox has to think about his entire life before he sings, which is the thing that's
Yeah.
broken my brain because, you know, whether it's a bad biopic, Freddie Mercury has to think of his entire life before he sings, or a good biopic, J. Robert Oppenheimer has to think about his entire life before he testifies, before I close committee. Whether it's one or the other, I can only think of that now. So, you know, you get this incredible range. They make like a double album worth of original songs for this film. They've, you know, created 45 to 50 songs within 6 months in the pre-production stage. Dan Byrne and Mike Viola, the songwriters who did, I think they did 16 of those. So they were like sort of the lead songwriters all the way through. But the soundtrack was produced by Michael Andrews as well of Christmas Number One.
Yeah, Michael Andrews, composer of the somewhat tonally different score to Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like overseeing it, but you've got Dan Byrne and Mike Viola writing like the bulk of, you know, the lion's share of the songs. But they sort of sent the script out to lots of different songwriters as well. So you end up with like Walk Hard, the title track is written by Marshall Crenshaw. And, you know, there's a bit later on in the film that's like the sequence that Dewey kind of having a breakdown that, as I say, it all mirrors what's going on with real singers. So if this is sort of him doing Smile, is him like doing the Beach Boys album where it's just like wall of sound type stuff. And Van Dyke Parks worked on Black Sheep, like they got him in basically to parody himself. That album that he worked on.
I'm fucking outraged that you beat me to the Beach Boys trivia about this film. That's supposed to be my job. But yeah, it is absolutely astonishing that they got Van Dyke Parks in and basically said, remember that time when you were working with Brian Wilson and he went absolutely mad? Well, we're making a comedy.
We're going to have a bit where it's like we need 20 more African percussionists and an army of didgeridoos.
I kept getting pushed this YouTube video, which I never watched because it made me irrationally angry. But someone had taken the clip of the Smile recording sessions from Love and Mercy, the actual Brian Wilson biopic. And they had this shitty little video essay thing where they were like, this scene from Love and Mercy proves that biopics learn nothing from Work Hard. And it's like, no, they're not doing it because getting a studio full of ghosts is a cinematic cliche. You don't have to do your fucking CinemaSins bell sound effect on it. They're referring to the same actual event.
Well, isn't that all of YouTube now? All of YouTube film criticism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But you know, so as I say, it's a double album's worth of. Sorry, just before I move on the Van Dyke Parks thing, actually, there's a quote from him in that oral history I mentioned from The Ringer, where he said, "It required the ability to self-criticize and to be the victim of my own joke, and I was put in that position, and I was delighted to do it." So it's lovely. It's sort of what you get from all of the singers who worked on this film. So that's all happening. I'm jumping around a little bit here. This is the Oppenheimer treatment of this movie's production. But, you know, the director and co-writer, as I mentioned, is Jake Kasdan. How familiar are you with the films of Jake Kasdan?
I don't know if I've seen anything else he's done. I know that he's like recently done the Jumanji sequels. I don't know if have I seen anything else he's done? I do not think so. No.
Well, the big one that I wanted to mention before this is, have you ever seen the film Zero Effect? Came out in 1998 with Bill Pullman in it. So Zero Effect is this film in which Ben Stiller plays this guy who runs around after his mate who's a consulting detective, Daryl Zero, played by Bill Pullman. And it's more or less Sherlock before Sherlock. It's like kind of a modernization of a certain Sherlock Holmes story, which I won't spoil because that is... It comes out over the course of the thing, but done with Bill Pullman as this like slacker genius detective and Ben Stiller as his Watson. And it's this thing that sort of it's a really good film and one of those underrated ones. Ryan O'Neill's in it as well as the guy who like brings the case to them. So like that kind of happens like 1998. And then the next thing Kasdan did was try to turn that into a TV show, which would have had Alan Cumming in the Bill Pullman role. But when nothing came of that, the next thing he does is Orange County in the early 2000s, which also stars Jack Black. And that's like the point where you think if John C. Reilly was the only choice here, like you could have gone with either of the other two people in that Oscars number. You could have done Will Ferrell, or you could have done Jack Black. Jack Black certainly is the more musically, he's sort of like in that early aughts thing where he's in movies like Orange County rather than movies like School of Rock and Kung Fu Panda, and even like going up to Mario Wayne 7 doing covers of pop songs on soundtracks. Like, frankly, I'd listen to as the joke this movie would make is if Jack Black wanted to do a cover of Dewey Cox, I would be all about Black Cox. Anyway, so Kasdan's coming to this off of that experience. He's also done Freaks and Geeks on TV with Judd Apatow. So he's a fan of music biopics, is where the idea for this came from. So this comes from a place of love. But also noticing that no one ever walks into a room in one of these movies without becoming the most important person. Like, if a woman comes into the room with him, then he marries her. If a man comes in, the man joins the band or manages it. And it's a fall and rise over a 2-hour movie. It's a Wikipedia entry dramatized. And like that's the starting point they come from. And you mentioned it's this thing of like, the YouTube thing of like looking at Love and Mercy and guilelessly going, music biopics learn nothing from Walk Hard. I think music biopics went away in a big, meaningful way after Walk Hard came out, because even if it wasn't like a box office success, filmmakers saw it and they were frightened of it. Like, there's an interview. Do you remember when Don Cheadle directed like a Miles Davis biopic? Miles Ahead. Yeah. There's an interview with the Telegraph from the time where he basically said his main goal was not to make Walk Hard. So, so as someone who has no affection for music biopics like of this type, I can at least admit that the Walk the Line Ray era was like superior to what we're getting in more recent years. This resurgence that Bryan Singer thoughtlessly kicked off again.
it took his greatest crime.
Yeah, it took Bohemian Rhapsody doing the music biopic worse than Walk the Line ever did to revive it, to make it a huge box office pull again. It's like, in fact, I'm not going to talk shit about films I haven't seen, but I'm not going to see One Love. I know you've seen One Love, the Bob Marley film.
Yeah, I'm trying not. I'm sort of scattering my thoughts about One Love across several podcasts because we've just done a Jamaican sort of themed month. But I will say this specifically. It does the scene where Dewey Cox is told that, his band will never get anywhere unless they can knock this recording engineer off his socks in the next song, but that'll never happen. And it does that absolutely straight-faced. It also, I thought about it another time because there's another biopic from like earlier this year that also does a thing from Walk Hard completely seriously in a film that I actually rather liked, but it is nevertheless my duty to tell you that Michael Mann's Ferrari contains a scene where Enzo Ferrari's mother says that the wrong kid died.
Sure, exactly that. Like,
yes.
Oh my god!
And I could sort of, in a strange way, I admired it because it shows that Michael Mann really does live in a bunker. He just spends 10 years at a time obsessing over these incredibly exact films, and he doesn't know anything that's going on outside.
Bunker mentality. That's incredible. I mean, the wrong kid dies becomes the recurring thing throughout this, doesn't it?
It does. Yes.
Yeah. His Dewey's parents are played by Raymond J. Barry and beloved character actress Margot Martindale, as we have to call her contractually. So this kind of the beginning of the film is you just have this flashback after the Dewey Cox has to think about his entire life to these two kids, and the child actors are brilliant as well, just fully playing up the guileless, like, ain't nothing horrible gonna happen today, while they're playing chicken and tractors and, and shit like that. And then eventually young Dewey chops his older brother in half with a machete, and you just get that sequence afterwards where the doctor's like, this was a particularly bad case of being cut in half. I was unable to reattach his top half to his bottom half, and Raymond J. Barry comes over, speak English, doc, weird scientist.
Yes, that's great.
I will end up quoting the whole movie if we carry on, but it's like the sequence that starts this off, that kicks this off, is a child getting chopped in half from a machete. And telling his brother, I'm cut in half pretty bad. You have to live up to like all of my potential, because I would have been a piano prodigy. I would have been president of the United States. So it's like, just from a character point of view, because like, I don't know, we got this deep in the podcast where I explained Dewey Cox isn't real. But I think people are probably picked up. But it's just as a bit of character comedy. Establishing that in such a, taking the piss out of Walk the Line type thing with Raymond J. Barry on the Robert Patrick, Johnny Cash's dad duties, sort of situates you straight away. But then there's like, as we've mentioned, it's all gettable if you haven't watched these films.
Oh, definitely.
But it's not to the extent, it's not the epic movie, disaster movie shit where it's like you've seen a thing. Like for a film that hasn't even come out yet, but you'll have seen the trailer, won't you? Oh, this is funny. Don't you recognize that sort of thing? But so it's like you've got the the Walk the Line thing running all the way through it. Whether it's Joaquin Phoenix playing like a young Johnny Cash, like so in this, it's like he's 15 years old and suddenly he's John C Reilly going, "Mama, you made it."
Well, that's a joke that's obviously still perfectly common thanks to Saltburn, isn't it? With its amazing cast of 30-something school kids.
Yeah, that's not even specifically just a Walk the Line thing. That's just like standard, isn't it? I mean, it's the other one that would be of the time would be the fact that in Beyond the Sea, Kevin Spacey plays Bobby Darin, who died aged 37. Kevin Spacey was 44 when he played the character in the film.
In fairness,
you can once again pop up with his greatest crime.
Yeah, he famously has trouble telling people's ages.
Oh, zing.
But yeah, it is a fantastic setup, and I like that they take their time with the setup and establish it in this world that is quite sort of skewed but believable. And your comment about it working if you haven't seen the movies, I think that's the case with a lot of really great spoofs. I still haven't seen many disaster movies. I don't care about disaster movies, but Airplane works, and it made me think that maybe we are living in a pretty good time for spoof movies, because they don't get made unless someone's got a really good idea for one, which is better than them just getting made when no one has a good idea for them.
Yeah, off the top of my head, the biggest one that's coming up is they're rebooting The Naked Gun next year, and the great idea there seems to be, let's get it with Liam Neeson instead, which is like, it's just sort of the same idea, but with someone less funny than Leslie Nielsen.
With someone who is already sort of skirting self-parody, yes, but
this is just the next step.
Every now and then now you do get something like, Black Dynamite's the one that sticks out to me from the past 15 years or so that is really exceptional. And like I say, there's no commercial pressure on that. No one was saying, 2010 is going to be a bereft year unless someone spoofs blaxploitation movies. No, people just had the idea and knew how to make it funny, which is fine. I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly that. It's just that you don't have to know that, like, David Krumholtz, later of the amazing Twitter stories, was in Ray, and he was in Bobby, the film about Bobby Kennedy getting assassinated. Was before he was in this as Dewey Cox's manager. But when there's all this stuff that's on the Blu-ray extras, they made documentaries. They went as far as the spoof, the EPK and documentary type stuff that they would make alongside Walk the Line and Ray, that would explain, how you inhabit the real Dewey Cox and all that he did to prepare for this role, and how he might win the Academy Award and all of this stuff. And you got David Krumholtz pops up in the middle of it, just going I worked with Jamie Foxx on Ray, and he wore these big glasses all the time, and with John working on this film, he was just on every drug you can name. He was taking LSD before every take. If he tells me he needs to be on angel dust to get this, then that's fine. And go back to John C Reilly going, I can't compete with, Christian Bale losing £50 and Jamie Foxx gluing his eyelids shut. I'm going to need to do this properly. It's just this tapestry of, like, even outside of the film, like the kayfabe of, like, just maintaining all of this promotional stuff.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Hang on a minute. Yeah, you mentioned the drug thing. There is this running joke about Tim Meadows singularly failing to warn Dewey off trying every single drug known to man. I think I can't quite find a reference to it, but I remember reading once that Judd Apatow is not as big a drugs guy as you might think from his often single-mindedly weed-focused movies. And I think the one moment where you can tell is when Dewey takes coke for the first time and he starts performing his signature hits in this sort of cod punk way, despite it being the early 60s.
Well, it's presented as he invents punk.
Yeah,
but that's how these movies do that. The first time he tries cocaine,
but that's
he
wrong.
invents punk.
Coke's a prog drug, Judd, you idiot. Speed was what the punks took.
It was a good gag, though.
It was funny.
You get the because you've got the Marshall Crenshaw song, you've got the Walk Hard, and then that comes up in different arrangements through the film as well. So you get the punk one, then you get his, like, when he's doing his chintzy 70s variety show, is that coming out and doing the disco style? It's which is again, but it's like that's what's beautiful in this. It's like, it's establishing its own world as much as, like, all of the in jokes that are in it. Like you mentioned Tim Meadows, who's also in Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping. So it joins the two films, because this pretty much leaves off in American music history where that picks up. So it's the Tim Meadows double bill of all of American pop music history, really. That's in there. But, like, it's like Pop Star in that, as we discussed when we did that episode, you can watch that and laugh at the bit where there's a wardrobe malfunction and everyone sees Connor for real has got his dick tucked back because his trousers are pulled away. You don't need to know that there was, like, a pull away costume change thing in a Katy Perry concert movie that obviously didn't go wrong, but it's like you don't need that deep cut stuff. Likewise in this, you don't need to know that John Denver reportedly chainsawed his sofa in half when his wife left him to laugh at John C Reilly hand sewing a sofa for so long that it turns from day to night and still not getting through it. So he's just, like, going out and, like, shearing the heads off flowers or pulling sinks off the wall. He pulls a total of 9 sinks off the wall in this movie.
What do you think the bathroom fittings budget for this movie was like? Because you've got to think that was the major expense.
Even bigger than the drugs budget. I do fucking love Tim Meadows as Sam, the drummer, and that guy was like, "Get out of here, Dewey. You don't want this." It's like, oh yeah, I don't want to get addicted. It's not habit forming. Like, it sounds expensive. It's the cheapest drug there is. You don't want it. And then just get weighted through everything else all the way through the film. He's fucking fantastic. I love him as an actor in general, but the fact that he's in both of these films just really connects them up, like this and Pop Star. This is the one that stands out. I love the fact that it's one of these, because it's an appetite film. You get a lot of things on another one, the Blu-ray extras, is the Line-O-Rama type thing, where they'll just edit together a lot of alternate gags that were, like, improved or workshopped on the day. Like one of them's Paul Rudd as John Lennon's going, "I'd like to draw things with Asian women," like stuff like that. But you learn from, like, the thing that Tim Meadows does in that scene, where after the Smile parody, where the band turns on him and they're all shouting different reasons why they're mad at him, and Sam just keeps going, "He never once paid for drugs, not once." There's this thing that, like, Tim Meadows had different lines to say and just kept saying it because it would be funnier. Just kept saying, "You never once paid for drugs, not once." It's brilliant.
In terms of other major cast members, there are 2 main women in Dewey Cox's life. The first one, his 12-year-old childhood sweetheart, Edith, is played by Kristen Wiig. And his second one, the June Carter to his Johnny Cash, structurally speaking, is Jenna Fisher. Wig is obviously still going great, about to become part of the 5-time hosts club on Saturday Night Live. It was just announced as we record this. Fisher, you don't see that much of anymore, really, do you?
She was just in the Mean Girls musical.
Oh,
along
was
with
she?
Tim Meadows as well. Yeah, she's in that as Katie's mum. In
Right.
that, yeah, it's a thing of the Kristen Wiig's kind of there at the beginning, and she gets that constant like, "You're never gonna make it," like very into like screaming at him in arguments, to just like softly going, "Love you, you're never gonna make it, okay." like, and just plays. It's one of these things where it's like early role. It's pre-Bridesmaids, isn't it? So it's just one of these things where you'll. And the film is stacked with that. It's stacked with people who will be big comedy stars throughout the 2010s, just popping up in tiny roles, and then it's just cameo palooza. Full stop, whether it's from singers or from comedians. But yeah, Jenna Fisher's in there, and again, I know this from the Blu-ray extras. She's went to see like the best vocal coach in the business. Like I said, at one point, went to see the vocal coach, and Meatloaf was walking out the other way. So it's like, right, this is a great coach. Got to the set, did the song, and they were kind of like, "Oh, you know, like when you record your voice, it says say your name after the tone, you say Jenna Fisher, and you listen back to it record, and it's like Jenna Fisher." So she's the only one in the film. So while John C Reilly does his own singing, she's dubbed by a singer called Andrea Correa, and the main one with those two would be the Let's Duet, like the sort of like the sort of
heartbreaking duet, really a beautiful love song, I thought.
Yeah, the cutesy, like innuendo-laden song that is the filthiest thing you could ever imagine if you just read it written down. It starts with, in my dreams, you're blowing me some kisses, and goes on in that.
I'd forgotten how amazingly blunt some of them get. Like, you make me want to beat off all my demons. Excellent. It's in terms of actors, sometimes actors have this year where they get into a weird niche, and this is the sort of thing that people make amusing, like 2 or 3 film letterboxd lists of. Are you aware that this was not John C Reilly's only comedy country and western duet of 2007?
I was not. What else was there?
He has a very good role in Robert Altman's underrated final film, A Prairie Home Companion, where he sings a country song with Woody Harrelson called Bad Jokes, which is entirely just a series of setup and punchline passed back and forth bad jokes. And it is very, very good, and I recommend people see it. Yeah.
I'm going to have to, I've got to seek out the film for that as well. Yeah, but yeah, that's the stock and trade for Let's Duet. It's just like the mad, like sort of interspersed with all this ambiguous stuff, including one bit where she's just kind of like leaning over, sawing in a low cut top, and he's just mindlessly banging a hammer on some wood with this look on his face. It's like that.
A lot of sawing in this movie, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's right after that, isn't it, when he kind of like tries to open up. So, do you ever have anything you loved or cared about that you accidentally hurt or killed with a machete? She's like, God, no. He's like, yeah, me neither.
In terms of very small cameos by people who would go on to be very big names in comedy, Jack McBrayer from 30 Rock has literally one line, and it's amazing.
Yeah, This Is America's Newest Hit, Walk Hard by Dewey Cox, recorded 35 minutes ago. And you've got the montage. You got the montage of people running, like kids running in the streets to go buy the record, ask for his autograph and that. But it's like, in all the times we've referenced Walk Hard, like when we've talked about films and stuff, I think I think Elvis is the example of a film that's made afterwards that has command of all these tropes because it's doing the unreliable narrator type thing. But this has almost like
kind of steroidal Baz Luhrmann version. Like if you're going to do a cliche, really bam it in the audience's face and make them know you believe it. And there's an integrity to that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It has like the almost identical scene to this, though. Like the first time he sings a note, young women become uncontrollably horny and they're like tearing their tops off and stuff like that. But in this, it's just the really it's just the really innocuous "Take My Hand." It's the least filthy song on the soundtrack. It's just that so much. Every time you watch it back, it's like, oh my god, every song on this soundtrack is filthier than this. But it's like again, the kayfabe of it, like they're keeping up they're not comedy songs. Like there are funny lyrics all the way through. Like certainly they spent 6 months where they could, making the lyrics better, making them funnier as well. But it's like they're all like Judd Apatow describes it on the documentary as like they could all be hit songs, but they're all slightly wrong. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the times, just when he gets into his kind of protest song era, and when he's trying to like, as I say, when he's just relating to other artists by ripping them off. So there's that extraordinary, like, "Don't Look Back" style black and white sequence that's just him doing a Bob Dylan spoof called "Royal Jelly" that has lyrics like "Mailboxes drip like lampposts in the twisted birth canal of the Colosseum," and it's just him. The mouse with the overbite explained how the rabbits were ensnared in the skinny, scanty surfs. Thresh the apothecary diplomat inside the free-eyed monkey within inches of his toaster oven live. It's just...
Well, this is one of the other things where I think they could have got Van Dyke Parks in, because even though I don't believe he worked with Dylan, there is I think this is in Love and Mercy. I can't remember, but I've read in Beach Boys biographies that like recording on Smile had to be like suspended for one day because Michael Love demanded to know what the line "over and over the crow cries uncover the cornfield" actually meant. It's very much in that lineage, I think.
It's very popular, very probably have come up when they were doing this.
I think quite possibly. They clearly know their shit when it comes to classic rock. I mean, aside from anything else, this is probably my favourite Beatles-themed biopic.
Oh, I mean, right, okay, we need to like just open letter to like Sam Mendes. I know you listen to the podcast, so listen to this. Why the fuck are you doing 4 Beatles movies? And do you intend to honor the best Beatles casting in movies, which is this fucked array of like perfectly the wrong people to play these roles? But they've established this thing where Frankie Muniz is dressed as Buddy Holly and says like, "Even I, Buddy Holly, think that you're going to be all right, Dewey Cox." And Jack White comes in as Elvis and explains that he's Elvis and he knows karate. Fucks off. That's it.
Yeah,
and then you get to this
incomprehensibly. I think we should point out. Yes.
Yeah, and you get to this, which is the punchline of it in so many ways, because it's 4 varying degrees of good casting and not. Like you've got on one hand Paul Rudd and John Lennon and Justin Long doing a good George Harrison. On the other end, you've got Scottish Jack Black as Paul McCartney. Like the veers out from Scouse to Scottish and back. And Jason Schwartzman, Ringo Starr in Upper Storm.
Did their accents, watching this back now, did their accents not give you a slight sort of Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things vibe?
Well, where's the vibe? If the characters themselves are American, do European accents. Which Ruffalo in Poor Things, I've laughed every single time I've thought of anything he says and does in that. But same for this. It's like this incredible sequence in the middle where the Beatles, the 4 Beatles from Liverpool, we're in India. And fucking Jack Black coming out with kicking off at John Lennon and going like, "I'm sick of you being so dark while I'm so impish and whimsical."
All
That's
right,
how he does the voice.
My band.
Yeah, do you remember when we did those gigs in Hamburg? Of course I did. I booked them. I'm the leader of the Beatles.
I mean,
I'm getting a mantra through. It's because we're getting a mantra through. Paul's a big fat cunt.
Despite their best efforts, and I think all 4 of them are terrific in that scene, I think the funniest single thing is John C. Reilly leaning over to Jenna Fisher and saying with absolute solemnity, "I think we're seeing a rift develop in the Beatles."
Yeah, it's just one of those narrating Bohemian Rhapsody's main thing, like just narrating as
Right.
it happens. Just again, it's that Forrest Gumpification of it all, like them going like, "We're big fans of yours too, Dewey Cox. We like to think, of a hard day's nights are guilty as charged." It's mad, but it's it kind of like, it knows why it's been pared down, because there is on the DVD and on the Blu-ray you get the option to watch what is described not as like the director's cut, not as the extended cut, but as the way overindulgent cut of the film. That's 2 hours long and has a bit like kind of in the 70s where Dewey gets married to Cheryl Teagues, who plays herself, and like there's like a whole extra wife in there and all that kind of thing. Whereas when you watch the film proper, even though when they talk about writing the music saying they all fell in love with the 70s stuff, they could do like a whole season of Dewey's variety show if they wanted to. That's like, the film does skip quite quickly from like 1968 to 1978 to 1998, and then like to the present day stuff at the end. Like it's well paced. It's not self-indulgent. Like as I say, they've done all those songs. Like if they did the full-length version of every song they did, it'd be 3.5 hours long. It'd be Dewey of Arabia, as they say. But it's like, so it's like you get the soundtrack album that comes out with this. I mentioned earlier on that there is like so the writers' strikes on, so there's no late night talk shows on to do the promotion, the stuff that they would have done, stuff they would have killed if you can do stuff in character or perform the songs and stuff. So what they did a live tour. Like Reilly did a tour as Dewey Cox in like comedy clubs, like just singing songs from the film. Brilliant. Which is like, and it might just make me a big nerd and not enough of a music fan, but when they say, like, if you go to any gig anytime in history, just go watch him like pretending to be Jim Morrison singing Beautiful Bride in some comedy club. So, and probably not being clear that this is tied to a movie promotion at all. But like,
Beautiful Bride. We've got to talk about Beautiful Bride.
Yeah,
because it's such a magnificent piece of having your cake and eating it. It is built up as the song that Dewey has to write in order to encapsulate his entire career. And music biopics often have sort of trouble with this because most real life musicians' careers do not end on a spectacular high note. I think Rocket Man about gets away with putting "I'm Still Standing" at the end. It's not the most resonant thing Elton John ever wrote, but it's a good note to go out on.
But it's also not, because it's also not Elton John died 2 minutes after this performance. Like Bohemian Rhapsody's Live Aid bullshit. But
Walkard really lays it on thick that this is going to be his crowning masterpiece. And you're expecting, to laugh. You see this as part of the film's irony. And then he starts playing it, and it is a very funny song, and it does manage to parody that exact spot in most biopics where they have to, like, end it when the artist is at the peak of their powers. And it's also fucking great. It's such a good song.
It is the one that, like we just had we're recording this the week after the Oscars have been on, and one of the best original song nominees is like from I think it's a comedy, like the Cheetos biopic Flamin' Hot has a song in it called "The Fire Inside's" written by Diane Warren, so it's nominated for best original song. But it just goes to show how this film like died a death and didn't have the promo behind it, that this wasn't up for best original song at the Oscars. Like it like any of the songs really, but Beautiful Rider would be the most likely because it's it's the sort of torch something. And as you say, the entire film spends the time hyping it up. Like he can't be right with himself until he creates his masterpiece, the song that sums up his entire life and everything's meant to him, the good times, like, and all that kind of thing. That what is he ends up singing? Flowers, babies, sharing the good times, traveling not just for business, accepting your mortality. These are all the things that he's learned, and he's written this song, so he just sings them in the bridge. But it's a banger of a song. A lot of the songs are bangers. Can I tell you, just in terms of so saying about they're obviously joking about You know, he might win the Academy Award. I'm not. He should have won the Academy Award for Best Actor for the amount of shit that he pointed is. He did a tour, Graham. He did a tour as the
Anyway. Yeah. Daniel Day-Lewis gets talked about as a method actor, but he didn't actually set up an oil company.
Didn't go with single bowling alley.
Yeah. At no point
not
did he
once.
Paul Dano to death. Never.
Yeah. So no nominations to the Oscars. Did get nominated to the Golden Globes. Ironically,
is worse, right?
could be. Well, I'll get to the. It's worse this year for another reason, but so Marshall Crenshaw was nominated for Best Original Song for Walk Hard, and ironically lost that to Eddie Vedder's song from Into the Wild. Eddie Vedder, he cameoing as himself when Dewey Cox receives the Lifetime Achievement Award, not from any particular organization. They just say, you're going to win the Lifetime Achievement Award, which is, again, it's just movie, like music biopic movie speak of what happens. Oh, you're winning the Lifetime Achievement Award. Yeah. And he has that amazing, like, 5-minute long, they recorded 5 minutes of stuff of him just coming out with nicknames for Dewey Cox over the years, like the tall midget, the hard walk, and this laboured thing where he's just like, where they're going and saying if Paul McCartney and John Lennon were the Cain and Abel of rock music, then, and Bruce Springsteen was Ezekiel, Iggy Pop was Methuselah, and just rolling on and never getting to the point, like never, like what does that make Dewey Cox at the end of all that? And like recording this, Eddie Vedder has apparently done a lot of these speeches. It's like, they're never going to invite me to do one of these, which is like, and if anyone's seen it, maybe not. It was also nominated Golden Globe, because this is what it's made for. If you're going to have a character that's best actor in a comedy or musical, John C. Reilly's performance in this is what it's made for. So of course he lost to fucking Johnny Depp in Sweeney Todd. Like,
wow,
John C. Reilly went on tour as a character. Johnny Depp fucking showed up. That was it. Yeah. And of course, because as I mentioned, writer's strike, there was no writers to do the Golden Globes. So this was the year the Golden Globes wasn't televised. So in all ways, this movie got fucked by that strike. And it sucks that 15 years later, we ended up in the same place again. And the actors joined in this time because of Money Men and Cunts.
Yeah.
Which is particular than I wanted to end that sentence. Sorry, go on.
Is that, I was going to say, is that your cumulative point? Is that your beautiful ride, the masterpiece that sums up your podcasting career?
It definitely mentions Money Men, and yeah. It's just, I mean, there are countless performances that should have won Oscars but didn't. But, and certainly, comedy ones. The entire, genesis of this, where they fought to cast John C. Reilly, is a song about how comedians don't win Oscars. And like the gag in that about how, Jack Black saying, what did you think when you ran around a racetrack in your pants, and Will Ferrell's mouth like, I thought I'd get to have dinner with Jeremy Irons. it's about the lack of, it's about all the lack of prestige in that. And John C. Reilly busts in, like, I can get you someone who can do both, and he does. And Christ, we should have more like this. We should have. Yeah, it's a character actor taking his leading man role with both hands and just absolutely bossing it. On the last thing so I mentioned this thing that's like the spoof, it's called The Real Dewey Cox, like this documentary that's like about the process of playing the real Dewey Cox. In that he's talking about meeting him and saying, and being asked by Dewey Cox. Oh, well, first of all, he's saying, like, all my life people have been telling me you look like Dewey Cox. And I suppose, like, if you put pictures of me at my age, at his age, and it's just two identical pictures side by side. Because, of course, it is. Because that's the joke. Like, when you watch right at the end of the credits of this, they do that thing where it shows you the real person at the end. Yeah. It's just John C. Reilly with a fake nose on, just singing Walk Hard in, like, a slightly different wig than we've seen him in the rest of the film. But in this documentary, he's saying, like, I went to meet him and, like, to see if I could play him. And he asked me, do you have the balls to do this? And he's like, yeah, I think I do. I was like, no, do you have the balls? Do you look like you can have the balls? And they just go on to explain how part of the Dewey Cox myth is he has enormous testicles. So to prepare for this, John C. Reilly had to go see this Italian ball maker called Giuseppe Maldini, who did Al Pacino's balls in Serpico, Kirk Douglas's balls in Spartacus, and it cuts to this like nice old man holding two cannonballs. in his hand, talking about getting fitted for prosthetic balls to play Dewey Cox. And it's backed up again, like a little of the pop star style thing, like what that does, where Simon Cowell and Ringo Starr are talking about Connor for real. Like it has people who are in the film, and then some who aren't. Like I don't know if maybe Sheryl Crow was in the film at some point and was cut out, but in this, she's merrily claiming that when she was in 8th grade, she wanted to be just like Dewey Cox, so she had sex with every 12-year-old she knew. You have Lyle Lovett, who is in the film, relating how he met the real Dewey Cox on his variety show in the 70s, and when he came off stage, he punched him in, like Dewey Cox punched him in the face, but for a good reason, because he's got to do what he's got to do, and I'll defend him to the day I die, because he's a genius for punching me in the face. It's like, again, as I say, the patchwork of everything around it, because, you know, you mentioned airplane as well, like that's kind of, they ended up, the famous thing with that is they ended up optioning the script, didn't they, for one of the airport movies and just making it funny. Like, this is just from whole cloth, like, this mad thing, you know, as much as it does reference to Walk the Line and the whole losing his sense of smell thing, which you haven't mentioned, is the reference to Ray. Like, they mentioned he managed to play his guitar even with no sense of smell because he learned by ear. It's like, oh.
Yes.
It's just the whole of it. I think it's pretty much for everything it's trying to do. I think it's a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I can just endlessly rewatch it. I'll watch it maybe once a year. And as you say, the songs are a big part of it. Like this, like Beautiful Ride's a banger. They all fit that thing of they could have been hits at different times in different styles, but slightly wrong. Yeah, it pulls that off so spectacularly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I think that wraps it up, right? I think that's a beautiful note to end on.
It's been a beautiful ride, yes.
It has, yes. If you want an even more beautiful ride, listeners, a sentence I should have thought about harder before saying it, we have a Patreon open at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show, where, as well as a bonus episode of this show every month, you also get whole exclusive podcasts that aren't available everywhere else. Our music and movie miscellany last night is one of them, as well as From the Video Aisle, looking at the less celebrated but just as good franchises from throughout genre film history. You also get written reviews of classic Asian genre cinema, Doctor Who, The X-Files, and Red Dwarf. But until 2 weeks' time, when we'll be back on this feed with more Pop Screen, I've been Graham.
I've been Mark. Remember, everyone, you're never going to make it.